Hey guys, so this is part 2 of week 9's talk about JavaScript and jQuery. So this video is going to be all about jQuery. So again, jQuery is a framework or a library that is built on top of JavaScript. That just makes it a lot easier for us to program in JavaScript. So essentially there's pre-written code and pre-written functions that we could use and reference rather than writing all of our own from scratch. So jQuery and the community behind it has done a lot of the heavy lifting and a lot of the hard work when it comes to making JavaScript a lot easier to program with using this framework. It's also being used pretty much by like 80 or 90% of all websites on the internet. So it's pretty standard across the board. I'm pretty comfortable saying that it's definitely being used everywhere, so you guys should be comfortable using it as well. With jQuery, once you have the library installed, and we'll do that together in a second, you can reference the jQuery library by referencing jQuery over here. And these are different methods that you can attach to any particular element that you're selecting. So this is basically how it works. This is a jQuery object. Inside of the parentheses is the selector that we are basically going to modify or animate or interact with. So that could be a HTML tag like li. It could also be a ID or a class name. So you have some options there. And then you can chain this method attached to it. So one could be, I want to add a class name to this list point. And the parameter in the class name method could be whatever the class name is. So it could be important or bold or quote, etc. Whatever class that you have in your CSS. So that's one example. So when it comes to programming, programmers usually like the least amount of things that they need to type. So rather than typing out jQuery every single time, you're going to reference the jQuery library. They also allow you to use the $ symbol. So whenever you see a $ symbol, it usually means it's referencing the jQuery library. So rather than just writing out jQuery every single time, you could just use the $ symbol. And it's basically the same thing. It's just shorthand. So like I said, you can select different elements. It could be HTML elements like li or p or h1, or it could be a class name. If it's a class name, then it's defined just like with CSS with a period in front of the name. And then you could also do IDs. And again, just like in CSS, the ID is represented by a hashtag or number sign, and then the name of the ID. So with jQuery, you could do this thing called chaining, which is chaining multiple methods together. So here we're referencing what looks like a div with an ID name of box. And then the first thing we're going to do when it runs is going to hide that box. And then after it's hidden, then there's going to be a delay of 500 milliseconds. And then we're going to fade in, animate in that box over the course of 1500 milliseconds. So that's called chaining. You can add multiple methods attached to each other to chain them together. Okay, so why don't we play around with this a little bit in code. We're going to be using glitch.com as a programming environment. If you are comfortable programming in something else, then feel free to use Sublime or Text Wrangler or whatever you're comfortable with. But since this is an online course, glitch.com seems to be a really good option. Log into glitch.com, create an account if you haven't already, and then we're going to create a new project. And we're just going to do a very basic HTML project. So hello web page. Click on that, then it's going to create a new project for us. Okay, so Glitch is very kind, and it creates all the documents for the most part that we need. So we have a README, which we don't have to worry about. We have an HTML document, a JavaScript document, and a CSS document, which is great. We could also, I'm going to rename this to be Info Design Week 9 JavaScript. Let's just say JS and jQuery. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. So also under show, this is kind of nice. You can show the web page rendered in a new window, or you can show it right next to your code. So I'm going to show it right next to our code. So this is what gets rendered right now with what Glitch has given us, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and kind of delete this though. So everything in the body I'm going to delete. So it's just an empty web page. Okay, and then it automatically saves and automatically refreshes the web page. So the first thing we need to do is get the Jquery library. So to do that, we're going to go to the Jquery's website. So if you go to jquery.com, and then once you're on the website, if you go to download and scroll down, you can download the entire Jquery library as one large file, but it's really not worth doing that. So if you go down, scroll down, keep on going down, there are using Jquery with CDN. A CDN is basically just a server that hosts all these external files, external like JavaScript files and libraries and frameworks. So we're going to use the Jquery CDN. So there's a link that says, okay, code.jquery.com. We're going to go there. And these are all the different versions of Jquery that you can reference. We're just going to use the most recent one. So there's a couple options. There's uncompressed, minified, slim, and slim minified. Let's just use the minified version. The only difference between uncompressed and minified is that minified is getting rid of all the unnecessary white space. Uncompressed is a lot easier to read, but minified is just getting rid of all those returns and tabs and whatnot. Mainly because it makes it a lot faster to load, getting rid of all that white space. So if we click on that, then we can copy this code, this script code. So you can, I think, click the copy to clipboard button, or just do Command-C to copy it, selecting Command-C. Then we're going to go back to glitch.com and go to our index.html file. And at the top, right in the head, right after metadata, all the metadata, or we could paste that in. So as long as this script is above our script.js file, then that's fine. If it's below, then this file won't know that this exists. So that's why it has to be first. So let's format this so it's a little cleaner. There we go. So this is basically linking this JavaScript, Jquery JavaScript file. So you could actually go to it and see what it looks like. So this is all the Jquery code that we are going to be referencing. It looks scary, but really it doesn't. We're not going to look at this. We just have to link to it. Okay, so now that's linked in our index.html file. Now we can start using Jquery. So why don't let's just quickly add a element in our body that we can play with. So I'm going to do a div, give it an ID of, let's call it box. And it's just going to be an empty div. It's an empty box. I'm going to give it some styles just so we could see something. Let's do width of 100. Let's do 200 pixels. Height of 200 pixels and a background color of red. Cool. I'm also going to add positioning relative. Okay. Okay. Looks good. So we have our div with the ID of box and some styles so we could just see what's going on there. Okay, so now in our JavaScript file, we can delete this. Actually, let's just delete it all. In our JavaScript file, we could start playing around with jQuery. Just like what I said before, you can use, you can write out jQuery if you wanted to, and then reference the box. Oops. The box by the ID number or ID name. And let's say, just hide it for now, see if that works. Okay, so jQuery then ID box.hide is gonna hide that box. But because we are coders and lazy coders who don't like to write out any unnecessary keystrokes, we're just gonna use the $, which works the same, and it's one character rather than, what is it, 7. Okay, so why don't we play around with this a little bit more? So we can say, okay, on load, we're gonna hide the box. Then let's add a delay of 500 milliseconds, and then we could say, okay, fade in over the course of 1500 milliseconds. Ooh. So now it's animating in, has a delay of half a second, and then it starts animating in, it's fading in. Kind of nice. So if we were to do this with pure JavaScript, it would take forever and give us all very bad headaches. So jQuery makes this a lot easier to do things like animation, interaction. Okay. So there are lots of methods that come along with jQuery. These are some of the more common ones that I use. HTML basically allows us to embed HTML into our HTML files by referencing an element or an ID or class. Text is similar, but instead of applying HTML, it's passing in just a text value. So if we had a p value and we wanted to pass in text, we can use like p.text and it'll pass in that text dynamically. Replace with is going to be similar to the text, but instead of adding on to what's already there, it's going to replace the existing text with something new. Then there's a removed method that's basically deleting elements from your HTML, hide, which is hiding, show, which is revealing again after you've hidden it, and then toggle allows you to toggle it back and forth to hide and show. Then there's append, where you can append content to the end of something, and then prepend is prepending content to the beginning of something. There's other stylistic methods you can use. You can do add class, which you're adding a class to an element that exists already. Remove class, removing a class from an element. And then you could add CSS dynamically. That could be like changing the color or changing the margin, or if you wanted to do multiple elements, properties with CSS, you can do that using the curly brackets and then separating it by a comma. And then for common event methods, there is the on method, on function that allows you to say, okay, on click or on mouse up or on mouse over, I want to run this function, I want to do something. In this case, on click, I want to hide whatever I'm clicking on. So this is just saying this element that I'm interacting with. I'm going to hide it. So let's play around with that for a little bit. Okay, so let's say, so let's also reference this box again and say, okay, CSS. I want to change the background color to purple. Oops, sorry. So instead of a colon, it's a comma. There we go. So now we're overriding the CSS that's in the HTML document with the color purple. Again, if you want to do multiple CSS elements, then you just wrap it in curly brackets, and instead of the comma, it's going to be the colon, and then you can say comma. Then I want to do the width. I want to override that to be 300 pixels. Oops. There we go. So now it's 300 pixels wide instead of 200. All right, so that's CSS. And let's we'll play around with onClick in a second. So there's other like basic effects and methods like delay. There's like slide up, slide down, toggle, slide toggle, then fade in, fade out, fade to, etc. Then you could stop animations as well. So we already did the fade in, and you just pass in the milliseconds. If you want to do something more advanced when it comes to animation, you can do animations on most CSS styles, like size and position, opacity as well. So here, let's say when we click on the box, we want to animate that box. That should be an ID, not a class. So we want to animate this to change the opacity and move the margin left. Or we could just say, I think, left instead of margin left. And this is going to animate over the course of 1 second or 1,000 milliseconds. Okay, so let's try that. So, box. We could probably chain all these together, but I'm going to do it separately. On click, we want to run a function. Then in that function, we're going to say, okay, when I click on this, which is the box ID, I want to animate. I want to animate it. So we can change the style, the CSS styles. So opacity. Let's change that to animate to 0.5. And then let's say left. Let's do top. We're going to say, change that plus equals 100. So what plus equals is basically saying take the existing value and then add 100 to it every single time I click on this. Okay, so if we run this and then click on it, it should change the opacity and move top down. Okay, top didn't work. Let's try left. Okay, well, let's just do margin left. There you go. So as you click it, it's going to move to the left, to the right, 100 times each, 100 pixels each time you click on it. Cool. And it'll also fade the opacity to 50%. Cool. So that makes it a lot easier to work with JavaScript, is playing around with jQuery instead, especially when it comes to animation and interaction. So another good thing to do with any JavaScript document is to wait until the HTML document is fully loaded before running your JavaScript code. Mainly because if you are running JavaScript that's interacting with something in your HTML and the HTML element isn't there yet, you can get an error. Isn't loaded yet, you can get an error. So this is a good way of dealing with that. It's basically using jQuery to say, when the document is ready, when the document is fully loaded, then run all of my JavaScript code. Good to do that and just wrap everything in that bit of that function. So document dot ready function, and then we pass in all of our code into this function and format it so it's nice and clean. Cool. Okay. So another great thing about jQuery is that because it's been around so long and because it's used by pretty much everyone, the documentation is spectacular. So if you wanted to learn more about how to do animations or how to change and modify CSS styles using jQuery, if you go to the jQuery website, so if you go to the jQuery website, jquery.com, and then go to API documentation. So you could search through all the different methods that they have here, or you could just kind of scroll through it. We're going to talk about some of these in the coming weeks. So there's attributes, changing attributes, appending. There's callbacks, which are helpful. Click CSS. So if we click on the CSS one, it'll give you some information about that particular method, how to use it, and then also some example code on how it's being used and some demos. So it's a great resource that you should be constantly going to and looking at as you're creating your own websites. Okay, so let's do a little project together. So for the assignment, I basically just want you to take what we talked about today and what we learned and use it to create a abstract, just interesting clock. So we're going to basically be moving objects on the screen every minute or second or hour or year. Hopefully something that we don't have to wait too long to see change. So we'll do something really basic together, and then I want you to kind of do something on your own and make it your own. Okay, so let's go back to glitch.com, and I'm going to create a new document for this. And I'm going to just let's call this one info design clock. Okay. And let's go to our HTML, and I'm going to delete everything that's in body. And I'm also going to go get some jQuery. So let's go to download again. Go to the CDN. So it's code.jquery.com if you just want to go straight there. Get the minified code. And then paste it into the head of our HTML document. So let's also go to show and just look at what's going on in the browser. So nothing is happening because I deleted everything from body. So let's go back in here into body, and I'm going to create 3 divs. A div for my hours, a div for my minutes, and then a div for my seconds. Okay. I have a div for hours, minutes, and seconds. So in my CSS, I am going to just delete everything that's there, that's fine. And I'm going to apply some styles to those divs that I just created. So I'm going to just do global styles for all the divs. Position is relative. Let's give them a width, 100 pixels, and a height of 100 pixels. And then for hours, give it a background color of red. Okay, there's hours. For minutes, let's give it a background color for, let's do green. And then for seconds, let's do a background color of blue. Okay, so I have a red, green, and blue rectangle showing up on the screen. Great. So basically the goal of this is to make these move from left to right and back to the start again based off of the current hour, current minute, and current second. So we have our CSS set up, we have our HTML set up, so now let's go to our JavaScript. So let's just delete everything again, start from scratch. And just like with pretty much every other JavaScript file, I'm gonna reference the document with jQuery and say when on ready, I'm gonna run a function. Okay. So on document ready, when the website is basically fully loaded, the HTML is basically fully loaded, now I'm going to run through my code. Okay, so I'm going to create a function called display time. In this function, I'm going to create a variable for my current time, set that equal to the new date object in JavaScript. Then I am going to create a variable for hours, set that equal to current time dot get hours method. A variable for minutes equals current time dash get minutes, and then a variable for seconds equals current time dot get seconds. So the next thing I want to do is let's do a console log. So we see that we are indeed getting these values, hours, plus minutes, plus seconds. Okay. So I created the function, but I'm not running the function. So I have to display time. I have to run the function as well. So let's see if that worked over here. Okay, great. So I'm getting the time every time I load this page. Awesome. Okay, so now that's working. I'm getting the right time for hours, minutes, and seconds. So the next thing I want to do is apply those values to the hour, minutes, and seconds boxes over here. So let's just say, okay, hours. We want to change the CSS for hours for left to be the hours value. Okay, great. And then let's do the same thing for minutes.css, and then change left based off of minutes. Minutes. Okay, so far so good. And then let's do the same thing for seconds. .css, left, seconds. So it's updating with the time for the hours, minutes, and seconds. Okay, but it's not updating every single second. So it's just updating on load, essentially. So there is a great function that comes with JavaScript called setInterval. SetInterval. And this allows us to update something every certain number of milliseconds. So we can update this function, display time function, and then we can say, okay, I want to update this every millisecond. Sorry, every second. So now, instead of reloading the page to see the time updating every second, it's with JavaScript we could do that automatically. So as you can see, the second blue box is actually moving slowly from the left to the right every second. So we can make this a little bit more dynamic by mapping it based off of the width of the browser window. So let's create var w equals window dot inner width. So that's the inner width of the window. And let's subtract the size of the rectangle, which I think is 100 pixels. So it doesn't go all, so it counts for the size of the rectangle as well. Okay, so now with hours, let's do hours times w divided by 23, and minutes times w divided by 60. Oops. And then seconds is going to be w divided by 60 as well. Mainly because there's 60 seconds in a full minute. So it's going to have to basically divide the width of the browser window into 60 places for the seconds. And then the same thing for minutes. There's 60 minutes in an hour. So it's going to go across the entire width of the browser and every hour, and then come back to the beginning. And then for hours, there's 23 hours in a day. So we're dividing the width by 23 segments. Cool. So this is a very simple basic clock that is updating every second using the setInterval function to do that. And you can change this if you want to update it every 100 milliseconds instead for some reason, or every millisecond. You could do that too. If you want to show milliseconds, that would make sense. but since the smallest value I'm showing is seconds, it just makes sense to do it every second. Great. So that is a good example of how to use JavaScript using an interesting data set, in this case a time as our data set. And we're using jQuery to make it a lot easier to do like the animations and updates with the CSS and applying the position, the left position, to the boxes based off of the hours, minutes, and seconds. Great. So basically what I want you to do is take what we talked about today and apply it to your own clocks. So you could play around with rotation, you can play around with color, you can play around with size, position, numbers, letters, you can do all sorts of fun stuff. So I want it to be fairly abstract. I don't want it to be any sort of like digital clock interface, anything like that. I want you to kind of get creative with what you're putting together for your clocks. Okay, so hopefully that was informative. And if you guys have any comments or questions, again, please add comments on the YouTube channel, add any sort of questions to the Slack channel, or just email me directly. Okay, thanks guys, and have fun with the clock project.